Hi, folks. Today, Fernando and I are reconvening to continue discussing the Yavanajataka, India's oldest astrological text on horoscopy, at least to date. And in this video, we're going to discuss chapters 35 through 38, which kind of give us a wide variety of topics, actually. And with the most intense chapter being, I believe, is it 36 or 37 on yogas?
36.
36 on a lot of yogas, basically the Nabasa yogas, a lot of which we find in Brihat Parashara Horashastra, and I think Fernando will talk about that a bit as well. And it's just a really meaty chapter, really wonderful stuff. So yeah, let's just get straight to it. I'm going to share the screen. Okay, and I'm going to zoom in a bit. So, yeah, chapter 35 is kind of odd. And Fernando, you said you had some ideas about like what it meant. I was kind of stumped by it. I had one idea, but I think yours is probably more.
No, go for yours first because
my one idea was that
maybe I'm wrong,
Yeah, it's just so like it's not very well explained, at least in English, right? And maybe we might even be missing some of this. It might be out of context too. It might not be supposed to be here, so to speak. But I thought that maybe they were talking about something called circumambulations through the bounds, which is a Hellenistic time lord, where basically you observe the bound on the ascendant, or that the moon or the sun is in, and then you basically do something called primary directions, which has to do with planets and stars rising and setting over the horizon. So it primary motion, basically primary directions. It deals with the Earth's rotation, its daily rotation. So you're calculating it like that, and basically what happens is, as let's say the ascendant moves through the bounds, which are the fivefold division, right? The trimsamshas in this case, you get a different planet ruling the period of time, and you get sublords based on planets aspecting those bounds in the ascendant. So
that makes sense. I mean,
yeah. So I thought maybe it had to do with that, but it's really not. It's really not very clear. So
do you want us to read the whole? Because it's only 5. I mean, it's the first 4 shlokas, if you want to read them. I mean,
sure.
First of all, he starts, one considers the terms. Obviously, we think about the Egyptian bounds right off, right?
Yeah. Well, at least with the way it's translated. Yeah.
The Trimalavamsha. So, but by Amshas, we already get the idea it's a division of the sign. So
right.
One considers the term Trim Salavamshas as having diversity of form and little strength of brilliance. When I saw that, I thought he was meaning combustion or something like that. But obviously, we're talking about division here. Whatever are said to be the authorities of a planet with respect to forms, positions, strengths, actions, and qualities. These are said to give rise to the natures in the native as the prorogator.
Yeah, and that's a Greek term, I believe, because I've seen that before in some of the Hellenistic texts, and I think it means like basically ruler of the times.
Yes, like the one who is promulgating something, or the one who is propagating something, which
something
is a Greek
like that.
term, is in connection with the Lord of its term. That's the thing. The thing here is that terms is the word that probably Pingree used, maybe incorrectly, I'm not sure, but let's continue. The signs counted from their dividing line, 0 degrees, are in order years. Their Dwara Samshas, for some reason we're talking here about Dwara Samshas suddenly, are in order months, right? The days are according to the degrees of the planets, prorogator in the period of fruition, Paka, because of the planets which are in the place and which have the influences which have been described in order, and because of the degrees being aspected by the sun and so forth, similar influences attain fruition in a period of fruition. Proceeding from the term Trin Salava, occupied by the sun, the prorogator goes on its course, giving suitable results. The numbering of the planets is in order: Moon, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Okay. Until then, what we have here is a division of time, right? And that's something I noticed, because when I read the chapter, it was kind of complicated to figure out, mainly because of the word term, right? So what you have here is the division of time, like between years, months, and days. So I think he's talking about a Time Lord system. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So what I wrote down was that what he says, for example, in the first shloka, he's talking about the qualities of the sign he's in. Okay. So when he says terms, I mean, he means just like the portions, maybe the divisions of time, and that they have forms, positions, strengths, actions, and qualities, or whatever, that Taurus is gonna behave. By the way, I think you have to charge your computer. It's in 34%.
Oh yeah, I know. Okay. I'll plug it in when it gets low.
Okay.
I do that almost every video. Like okay. Very quickly. Like
I just saw that and I mentioned it. But I mean, I think by terms he's meaning the idea of spaces and time. Okay. So, and then he talks about these are the gift of nature, blah blah blah, prerogators of connection, time lord, and it's like okay. So he's saying the signs in the second shloka, counted from their dividing lines, are in order years. Their Dwara Samchas Vagas are in order months. So what I thought was the idea of the Time Lord system, right? That each perfections,
I think you're right. Yeah, I see it now.
The first sign is a year. So, I mean, you're 0 years old when you're born. That's the first house, the second house, the third house. Or, I mean, I'm sorry, the first sign. So you got the signs, right?
Right.
So the signs are each year. And then he talks about Dwara Samshas. And I said, what does the Dwara Samsha have to do here? But what he means is the division of 12. So he's meaning that in each year you get 12 months.
Yeah.
So it's basically the idea that each progression, each sign is a month. Obviously, you have to be counting 12 months for a year, not the older system of the 10 months per year. So and then he talks about the days are according to the degrees of the planet per the period of Frisian, taking into consideration that each sign is 30 degrees. So we're talking about 12 months of 30 days each, right?
Yes, yeah.
Which would be the old system. So I think what he's meaning is like the Time Lord system, the Profections, right? The idea that every 12 years the cycle repeats itself. So I think that's what Sfudishvaya meant by this passage. And then in the fourth shloka, you get the Tema Mundi from Cancer, right? Moon, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars.
Oh, okay.
Like Cancer, Leo,
Virgo, Libra, Scorpio,
Sagittarius, Capricorn, and then you repeat. Right.
Wow. Okay. Oh my God, that's amazing. So we're really seeing some heavy duty stuff in alignment with Hellenistic astrology here. I mean,
I could be wrong. I mean, I think you're
right. I think the terms thing, the bounds or whatever, like it seems like he kind of glosses over that, whatever it means, whether it literally means like the trim samshas that we saw earlier in the text, the fivefold division, or if it just means divisions in general. But then he definitely goes into perfections starting, right here, like you said. But the idea is that the Dwada Samshas, like that is how perfections work in terms of months, right? You start with the sign itself, the first month of the year, and then you just continue in the order of the sign. So it is the Dwada Samshas in a sense. And then he's saying that like when you get to a specific month or whatever, you look at the planets in that sign to see what day they're going to give their effect. So if a planet's at 24 degrees and it's like the third sign from the perfections, it's the third month, 24 days in, roughly speaking.
Taking into consideration that you have to measure time in that system because the modern year today is not 360 days, it's 365. it's 365 and 1/4, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
a weird decimal.
Yeah, that's why we have the extra day in February sometimes. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so and the fifth shloka, he says this is the sub-period of fruition, and see he's mentioning this. He first mentions paka, which would be the period, and then he mentions bipaka, which would be the sub-periods, and that's like what gave it off, right? The idea that it's a Time Lord system, which has
Okay.
previously been determined according to their rule is to be divided into parts, beginning in order with 1 and ending with 7. I didn't understand that. So
I didn't either. Yeah.
and these are to be measured in moments and other units of time which have the characteristics of the signs and other divisions of the zodiac, and which are subdivided in many ways, and those whose places and qualities are in fixed sequence. So I think that's what he means, because in a way it would be interesting to see volume 1 of this critical edition, to see how Pingree what's the original Greek word for the term, right? That would be nice to see. Maybe it's some sort of word that some Greek scholar can help us understand, right?
Yeah,
Obviously,
I've never looked into that actually. The original Greek term for what we translated as bounds. Robert Schmidt translated them as confines, which
okay.
is good to know because it just gives a different connotation to the word. But I just can't stand that word. It's just too long.
You know, I was
I like
seeing
bounds.
I was
Bounds is
seeing
my favorite.
I was seeing an interview with Dimitra George the other day, and she
Cool.
said that in the ancient world, you know, people who weren't Greeks would always say that the Greeks were liars, because when you write ancient Greek, I mean, you can extrapolate the meaning of the words in many ways. I mean, you can understand the words
Oh wow.
in different ways, and
I love that though. I love that about
yeah.
some of these ancient languages. Like, I mean, the poetry is amazing. Like in just as an aside, like Deva in Sanskrit, you know, we now just think of it as gods, but it like the original meaning is something like light bearer or like or something like that. You know, it has
The
this
good guys, the good guys.
yeah, it has this connotation of like light, and so does
Yeah. And you
so
know
does the
that
word for
another
cow. For
what?
cow.
I'm sorry.
Word for cow in Sanskrit, which is like it's like the root of it is like go or something. It also has to do with light or dawn. And so when you have like the herds of cows in the Vedas,
It's like Gao. That's where
yeah,
V
cow.
comes from too.
You have the herds of the dawn. You have the herds of light, basically.
Nice.
So it gets pretty poetic, actually.
Sure. And did you know that another term for Asura is Adeva?
Oh, okay. Well, Asura originally also meant like master of the house, and it's used to describe like Savitri and some other high
Yeah.
beings in the Vedas. So that word, you know, also has a different meaning originally, but it has a double, triple meaning. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah. It kind of makes you think about how languages have de-evolved in many ways.
Yeah,
You know, especially English, that is like a Frankenstein language. You know, you
it
have
is. Yeah.
Latin, French, Norman, you have
German.
Viking. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a very simple language in terms of how verbs work. But yeah, whatever. So that's my supposition about this chapter. So
Cool. Well, I think that's great, and I mean, that's really insightful stuff that I didn't pick up the other day when I was reading this. But I think like this makes me want to experiment with this order that's based on the thema mundi. You know, it makes me want to like figure out a Time Lord for that if I could.
Well, but I mean, I think he just means the idea of the order of the signs. I'm not sure. I mean,
I don't know.
Swedish masters. What was
Spoojmeister?
Spoojmeister, yeah. Another one for the Spoojmeister. But yeah, I think that's how I understand it.
Cool.
I don't pretend to be right, but I think it's a way to interpret this passage.
Cool. Well, okay. Should we move on?
Sure, sir. Let's go.
Great. All right, the illustrious chapter 36, which is quite long and has quite a lot of yogas. So we won't be able to go over every single yoga, but we should definitely dive into a few of them. these are basically like, he starts out by saying that, first off, this is another point in the text. He's done this several times already, where he clearly says to look at these things from the ascendant and or the moon. And we've talked about this before, but like I've been using Chandralagna a lot more for charts where there's no birth time shown, and I am just
you usually do that, yeah.
I am just blown away by how accurate it is. Like it. And I mean, my friend who studied with Hart Defoe for many, many years said that, I mean, she said that Hart at one point said that Chandralagna is really more important than the Lagna. And who knows what the context for that was, and who knows like what else he was talking about when he said it. But the point is like, I was talking to her about this, and she was like, yeah, no, it's incredible how well it works even in a known birth time where you have the ascendant. So unfortunately, the downside of that for me is that it makes things a little more confusing at times, because, you know, I want to, which one should I take to be more primary? But I think that I just wanted to point this out, because it's like we're seeing again that Yavanajataka, a very old text, is really giving a lot of importance to the Chandralagna, just like Jaimini Sutras does as well, and even I think many other Indian texts too. I'm sure Parashara does somewhere, although I can't recall it at the moment. But then he talks about like how these yogas have these names, like these poetic names, like the ship and the umbrella. And he seems to be saying here in Shloka 3 that, you know, for one who sees objects of various natures, the likeness of shapes is infinite. And I didn't really understand this at first, but I think what he was saying is that, well, I'll read the rest. These are to be understood as existing in the various parts of the world and having names similar to their likeness and shape, meaning that like the names of the yogas are like a poetic way of interpreting them or something like that. I think that's what he's hinting at least.
As they usually are.
Yeah. So kind of a esoteric passage there until you read the rest of it and you start to see that. And then he gives at the first shloka here just some basic, these so-called yogas have meaning which depend on the natures of the planets and on their courses through the signs and so forth. So it's always important to take into account like the key planets forming the yogas, you know, like for example, even though it's unspoken, if we look at this first yoga here, the ship, right, where all the planets are between the first and seventh house, meaning under the horizon. And I think that it'll still form even if they're not under the horizon, but I think that it's probably more powerful if they are all literally under the horizon, or almost all of them, right? Like I can think of a chart where the only planet above the horizon is like one planet in the 10th, or another chart that I was examining in my little series on basic steps in birth chart analysis, like the only planet below the horizon there is the moon. So it's like almost, you know, the umbrella one, which is the opposite of the ship. But my point is that it would make sense with the ship or the umbrella or any of these first ones, right? The bow or the false bow, which are just hemispheric yogas, to see the first planet and the last planet, you know, and probably derive something from that. So, you know, with the ship yoga, it leads to birth of those who have troubles and lose what they have gained. And I won't dispute that. I won't say that like that benefics being the first and last planet will change that, but they might make it different. You know, they might, whatever that first and last planet is, would be a way to interpret this and make something a little bit more out of it. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Cool. So yeah, these first four are just, you know, is it between ascendant, descendant, descendant, and ascendant, or is it between like midheaven and IC, or IC and midheaven? And again, he's definitely talking about this isn't just the 10th house and the 4th house, at least in the way Pingree's translated it. It's possible Pingree took some license here, but I don't think so. I think that I have a feeling that he really did mean midheaven and hypogee, which is the angle opposite the midheaven, right? So it's not quite as simple as just 4th and 10th, 1st and 7th. I think you got to look
Definitely,
at
you have to take in consideration the cusps. Yeah.
Yeah, I really do think that, and I think and it just makes a lot more sense astronomically too. So
And I just wanted to say that these are basically Navasa yogas. I
right,
mean, the names changes. There's a part where they're identical, and he also mentions the Mala yogas, which are the beads. You know, malas.
yeah,
You know, you have to be very careful with that word because mala is rosary, or like the type of Vedic rosary, but mala is like
bad, like
yeah,
meaning like
it's
bad or
shit. It's shit.
oh,
It's like
okay, it's shit.
excrement. Yeah, it's a
Okay,
poop. A poop.
okay,
So you
all
have to
right.
be very careful with that word. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we have a Mala yoga here, but I could be wrong. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. That's the difference between the long A and the short A in Sanskrit. So yeah.
wow. Okay, so I don't know. Are there any ones that?
Well, I just wanted to say that in Shloka, well, I mean, the first ones, I'm going to jump to 45, but is there anything you want to do, you want to say before? Because these are interesting yogas, and, you know, Navasa yogas are very important because they form the basis in terms of analysis of yogas when you see the chart. They vary. Um,
Yeah.
I've always seen them as a, you know, as a friend of the Lunar yogas, in terms of what you have to do at the
Okay.
beginning of an analysis in a
Okay.
chart from a
Sure.
Vedic point of view, of course.
Sure.
And when you see them, they're usually there. But the thing with Navasa yogas is that you're gonna probably get like 3 or 4 at the same time. So
Yeah.
you always get more than one. It's very rare to see like for example, the one we mentioned, like the boat yoga, the now, or
Yeah.
atapara,
You'll
which
see most of it. You'll see like most of it, but you'll see like usually 1 or 2 planets
yeah,
sticking
yeah,
out or
yeah.
whatever.
And he changes the names sometimes, which don't correlate with the with the names in Parashara. And it's very funny because,
Okay.
and another thing I noticed is that these yogas are given in chapter 36 of Yavanajataka, and the Navasa yogas are given in chapter 35 of Brihat Parashara Horashastra. So it's kind of funny that they're almost at the same number of chapter in terms of both books. I'm just saying that because I found that to be interesting. I don't mean there's any correlation or anything, but it's interesting.
Sure. Yeah, that is interesting. Like, why do they come at such different times in the text, basically?
Yeah, and more or less at no, they came at more or less the same time. It's chapter
Oh, more.
35
I'm
and chapter
sorry, I
36. Yeah, yeah.
misunderstood that.
No,
Okay.
don't worry about that.
Huh.
And I just wanted to say that in Shloka 45 to 51, which are the next ones.
Oh, you want to jump there?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I have some stuff underlined too. Then we'll jump to after this.
Yeah, 45 to 51, it's basically verbatim from what in Brihat Parashara Horashastra you have that
Oh,
verbatim.
the Sankhya yogas.
Yes.
Okay, so that's based on numerology, sort of where the planets are in either 1 to 7
Correct.
signs, right? They're all in 1 sign, all in 2 signs. For people who don't know, all in 3
And we
signs.
mentioned that before in another video. We mentioned the Sankaya yogas. I don't remember.
Yeah, no, we did, and I think this is what I was thinking of when I said they come back like later. Like he sort of mentions them earlier as just like he doesn't call them yogas. He's just talking about if all the planets are in this many signs and so on. That might have been the last video in the series. I can't remember, but yeah, but now he brings them in as like actual yogas with names um and yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely, these are interesting yogas, but he makes a point that these don't exist if the other yogas that he's given before
Are not present.
are not present. So like if you have a umbrella yoga or a ship yoga, then basically these ones are not present, So I think that these could still be I think that this concept can still be utilized, like the number of signs a person has planets in, but perhaps it's just not as extreme if one of those other yogas is really dominating the chart.
Usually you combine them both, but that's
Right.
what I'm saying with Navasa yoga.
Some people do that, yeah.
You have a lot of them going on at the same time, and I just wanted to say that we have here shlokas 45 to 51, and you see this exact definitions, or more or less the same ones, in Brihad Parasha Horashastra in chapter 35, shlokas 16 to 17.
Oh wow, okay.
So for people who are interested in comparing the both books, okay?
Yeah, and I'll just say, like, I think the reason that at least like this author and other authors have approached it this way in terms of like these yogas don't exist if any of the others do, is because like even though this chapter is huge and it lists probably like 50 plus yogas, I think it's like the astrologers of this era or whatever, sorry, I'm losing my words here, wanted to focus on like the one of these that was the most prominent, and then use that as like a general look at the whole chart, right? So it's very similar, it's almost identical in a way to Mark Edmund Jones's planetary patterns, which is like a modern thing, and Rudyard used those too for those interested. It's a really wonderful methodology where you look at what they identified, like between 7 and 10 shapes that the planets can create. Of course, they use the 3 Trans-Saturnians as well, but not the nodes for this. So it's a little different, but they look at these like shapes that would happen. So like, one of them's called like the bucket, which is like where you have all the planets on one side and then a single planet sort of roughly in the center on the other side, forming like some kind of a bucket, or you could call it an umbrella or whatever. Or they have like the hemispheric pattern, which is the same as those first 4 yogas, like the ship, the bow, the umbrella, and the false bow, right? It's just a hemispheric pattern. And so it's really cool to see in this, ancient tradition that there's something very similar, that it wasn't just like a sort of superfluous modern astrological invention. It was an invention based on deeper symbology of shapes.
Do you have any of those on your chart? Because for example, I don't have planets in the west. I mean, how do you say it? Between the midheaven and the opposite point, they're all between the 10th and the 4th house. So that's an Navasa yoga. But
yeah, that's the bow, I think, right? And that's like a
exactly.
pretty auspicious one. Yeah.
Between it, I mean, I have planets in the 3rd, in the even Trans-Saturnians, right?
Oh wow.
3rd, 2nd, 1st, 11, and 12.
So yeah, that would be the hemispheric pattern, Eastern hemispheric.
What does he say about it? Let's have fun about it.
This text, you mean?
Yeah, is that the bow or the reverse bow?
That's the bow. If they are between, maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, no, I'm right. Sorry. If they are between the midheaven and the hyphagy in the Eastern hemisphere, it is called the bow. In this yoga are men born who are wealthy in the latter half of their lives and who have famous courage.
There we go.
Pretty auspicious.
First, yeah, thank God. No venereal disease reference.
Yeah, I don't have any of these ones. Oh yeah, that's right. The venereal disease thing was creeping up on you. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, man. I gotta go to the doctor. Yeah.
Did I get that Aquarius checked out or whatever it was that was creating it? Yeah. I don't have any of those perfectly. I guess technically what I do have, maybe the closest thing I would have would be
you have them pretty scattered. I mean,
yeah.
You don't have
well, I have one. The only planet I have in an angle from the moon is the malefic moon waning. So in a sense, I have close to the malefic planets in ascendant, descendant, but I think that's actually later. I think that's called the Sarpa yoga. Yeah, if the malefic planets are in the cardines and benefics or not, this is the serpent. Yep, I technically have that. In it is the birth of fools, injured men, thieves, frauds, prisoners, and vagrants. Although, you know, I don't know, maybe because it's the waning moon, it's a little less pronounced. Because I've never received like any major injuries, and you know, I won't deny that I'm a fool. I'm definitely not a thief though, and I'm not really a fraud. Although as a kid, I did try to like cheat some kids out of rare Pokemon cards,
Yeah.
but that was the extent of my fraudulent activity. So,
Better to have them at young age than later on. Yeah.
but I think that like because I try to interpret everything more humanistically, for lack of a better term, and by humanistic I mean more like in terms of how Dane Rudyard used the word, not in
Yeah,
terms of
more in a symbolic way. Yeah, more.
movement. Yeah, more meaning, more psychological
Yeah.
meaning. So like for me, having a malefic there, it does make sense in terms of like how I've had a lot of issues and struggles with other people. Like I have a hard time relating to most people on their level. I have to adapt myself to relate to them, and I often become, you know, rather frustrated with people. So I think that yoga really does speak to that. You know, have I been injured? Well, okay, maybe not literally much, but I was injured emotionally in high school quite a bit by you know, bullying and stuff like that. Um, so you know, I can see where they're going with this. I can see the idea that it's just it makes things challenging, a little more challenging. It makes the person not as easily able to like fit in and be comfortable in the way maybe most people are. So yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a couple things I underlined.
Sure. Go for it.
15 was interesting to me. Why was it interesting? Let's see.
If the planets are 4 places apart, this is like a Mala yoga. This is one version of it.
Okay.
And I just want to say that there are Ashubha and Shubha Mala yoga. So
Okay.
if the planets are 4 places apart without being in a Cardine, they call it the well, Bapi. A man born in it famous and enjoys the world, position, and righteousness, Dharma. Later, he has a few sons. That one?
Yeah, I don't know. Wait.
15?
Yeah, for some reason I underlined it. I thought it was interesting, but now I can't remember why. I just realized that actually
Oh,
I
because you
have
can't.
this yoga and I didn't
Because
realize it when
wait.
I read it. So
Cardines are Kendras, right?
yeah, those are the angles. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why you underline it, because it's very hard to have. You can't have it. How can you have in 4 places and not in a Cardine?
I think it just means it. Oh,
That's why
oh,
you underline it, right? You can't have that.
that
That's
might be it.
impossible.
But I think I was just thinking how like it's interesting
But that's
how
impossible, is it? That's a mistake.
unless you interpret it as if the planets are in 4 places apart, beginning in a house that's not a angle,
Okay.
which is how I'm interpreting it at the
Okay. Okay.
moment. But you might be right as well. Like, how could you have that? Well, yeah, there's a few different ways we could interpret it. But it,
Then use Fujimeister.
yeah, the other places. Huh. Yeah, I don't know why. I just thought that was interesting for some reason. I just thought it was interesting that if like the angle wasn't emphasized, it was actually like considered to be really quite good. Um or it could mean okay, or it could mean if all the planets are in like angles to one another but not in the cardines. So if they're all in succeedant houses or cadent houses too. Maybe it could mean that. I don't know. You know,
I don't know.
I'll have to go over this after we're done with the video, and because now I'm curious, like what the heck is he talking about? Because he does talk about like having, you know, and maybe it's the Mala yogas again, like having, you know, such and such many planets in a row, right? But not starting in an angle or starting in an angle. He does talk about that somewhere here in more depth, but I can't remember where. Anyway, then I was curious about 24 through like 26 roughly. If
Go
all
for
the
it.
planets are in two consecutive places, beginning with the ascendant, they call this yoga the Great Club. It leads to the birth of men who are servants to the desires of others. So basically, that means in the first and second house, right? If all the planets are in the first and second house.
Yeah, unless you take another ascendant, moon lagna,
Or
or
moon lagna too, right? And then if the same yoga begins with the midheaven, it's actually quite, a bit better. If with the descendant, those afflicted by debt, which actually would link the eighth house to debt instead of the sixth, which is usually done.
yeah,
And then from the hypogee, the IC of
or
the initiate,
maybe karmic debt.
I don't really consider the two different.
I don't know. Well, yeah, that's true. That's true.
But yeah, from the hypogee of the initiated, so this yoga at the hypogee, the fourth house cusp, makes for people who are more mystically inclined and
Yeah, and the fifth is the house of students in many ways. So,
cool. Yeah, and the first or the fourth is definitely it's a moksha place, but even in Valens's text, Vedius Valens, he talks about it as being like mystical and mysterious and stuff. Oh, and then you know what's funny? I was looking for this tortoise yoga because I was there's another shloka where it's mentioned that was interesting. So I'm glad I found it. But did I underline the other shloka? Maybe not. Oh well. Yeah, the because he mentions the tortoise later too. He says if this yoga occurs, something relative to the tortoise, and that's 26 here. The kurma. If the planets are in three places, namely the hypogee and the places before and after it, they call it the tortoise, and it's born a king of great fame who has many wives, sons, and relatives. So that would be fourth house, third house, and fifth house. And then he gives similar yogas for all the angles. I don't know. Are those in later texts too?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can answer that.
I found those really interesting because it's kind of like a Shubha Katari or even Papa Katari yoga, right? It's like, but you also have, I mean, it's different, but it's just this idea that like the two houses on either side of a house or an angle kind of give it some buffer, you
Yeah,
know?
which would be a Shuba Qatari, yeah.
Mhm.
Although some people say that Qatari can only be done in the ascendant, so it would be like in hemming, positive hemming.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And then I definitely had, it just goes on, and I highly recommend this chapter to people, but I don't remember where that other reference to tortoise was. That's okay. But, oh no, here it is. I found it by accident. If there is a yoga like the tortoise at the hypogee and another at the ascendant, and if two planets are on the two sides of the midheaven, they call it the full pot. It leads to the birth of men made famous by their families and gaining renown for their own deeds. How is this possible?
so you have to have planets in the second and the 12th and the third and the fifth, right?
I guess, but he made the tortoise. Oh, well, he says like the tortoise. So maybe he's excluding the planets actually being in the angles there. Because that's the only way it would be possible if you had, because you couldn't have, I mean, that's six planets, it leads to the birth of men, or sorry. And then if two planets are also on the two sides of the midheaven, so we have it two sides of the IC, two sides of the ascendant, and two sides of the midheaven. I mean, that's
6 planets.
so that is possible. Okay, that would be extraordinarily rare, and I think it would definitely correlate with some major power and fortune, like it's saying.
Yep.
So but how do you? I don't know. That's like too obscure for me to
and
ever
that's and
remember.
that's something that I've always said. It's better for all planets to be in one house and one sign alone. Like, and usually that correlates with these these types of yogas, like the one we just saw.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, so then the final one I guess I was interested in was 58. Those yogas which excel with regard to planets and places are said to be influential at birth. The rest are to be recognized as being influential always in the Ashtaka Vargas and in the Dashas.
Yeah, Ashtaka Varga.
That's what interested me. The fact that Ashtaka Varga, if it's what we're thinking it is
it this first
really,
time we've seen this in
yep,
yeah.
it's really quite old then. It's potentially a very old system.
Or it's a corruption. Yeah.
Or it's a corruption, yeah. We don't know for sure, but Ashtaka Varga is interesting in that as a system, it doesn't really deal with the nodes, just like Yavanajataka. Right? There's no way of calculating the bindus for the nodes.
Correct.
Unless you take maybe the lord of the nodes and just use its bindus, but otherwise there's no. So I just thought that was pretty cool to see that. Yeah. Did you want to say anything else?
No, I'm just thinking about chapter 37 that I didn't understand at all. So
okay, yeah, let's do it. This
basically
was weird.
a chapter that has to do with the length of life of but I'm not sure how it works. I don't know what your opinion about it is.
Okay, so the problem is we don't know what kind of years he gives to each of the planets. Like in Hellenistic astrology, the planets have years that you can use to derive a length of life. And so, like, if we were to assume that he's using those years, which are not mentioned here, unfortunately, right? Like, I can think off the top of my head that Saturn in his full years gives, I think, 57. Okay, so the idea would be that, like, if we were looking at Saturn, it would obtain a double amount in its own triplicity, in its own Navamsha, in its own house as well, maybe, like, so being like double, like Zovar Gotama or something, and then in their Gotamshas, and then they give a triple number of years when at full strength in their exaltations or retrograde. So they give the most powerful. They would give 57 years maybe for Saturn. So I don't know. It's not really clear. Yeah. I'm just reaching into space hoping to find something here. But
it makes sense in the idea that the better the dignity, the better the planet, hence the better the years.
The lifespan. Yeah.
Exactly. The years. I mean, the astrology of death is something that is very occult, and it's something that a lot of people have different opinions about it, but certainly here we don't have the complete pieces of the puzzle in terms of interpreting this chapter in a correct way, I guess.
No, we don't, but I mean it is similar to, like, because there's the greater years, the middle years, and the lesser years in Hellenistic, and then the Persians went pretty wild with this and derived like a whole methodology of length of life, which does work pretty decently, but it's not meant to be exact. It's meant to be approximate, and you have to do other things to get the actual like date of death. But then it kind of gets random. Like why all planets except Venus and Saturn suffer when they're in their dejection? Like what? I don't get it,
We have to take a time machine and ask him.
Yeah. If several planets are in one sign, the strongest one destroys its own period. This is similar to that, those like having 4 planets and becoming an ascetic. A malefic planet in the 12th place from the ascendant destroys its entire share. A benefic half. That's pretty consistent with basic ideas on the 12th house, I think. The malefic planets in reverse order in the places from the 11th to the 7th destroy from their own dashas fractions ranging from 1/2 to 1/6. The length of life is a sum of all the dashas. I mean, maybe, Vimshotri dasha being 120 years, that could be a reference to that. But we don't see Vimshotri in this text as far as I know. And this whole thing of like the malefic planets destroying in these like fractions, like maybe it's like, you get 1/6 at the further you get away from the ascendant. It's not really clear, it's like, again, it's one of these things where, okay, if it destroys completely in the 12th house, then maybe you go down in increments as you go through 11th to 7th. But like you've said, we just don't we don't have the whole technique here. So
Next chapter.
okay, chapter 38.
Chapter 38 deals with bad combinations, and I read them all, and they all make sense. You know, it's we have the typical 6, 8, 12 combination, malefic aspect. So it's very, very straightforward, very easy, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
Sense, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is pretty straightforward. Is there any of it we wanted to talk about a little more?
Not necessarily. Although we have to
Oh, I
say,
have some stuff. Okay.
as we've mentioned before, that usually these combinations are very rare. I mean, the combinations for penury, for very bad luck, usually you're not going to see them on clients, because these are usually people who are, you know, bums, or who are people who are just destitute,
Insane or something. Yeah.
insane.
Or
Exactly. You're
yeah.
rarely going to see this chart unless you are a health professional who is also into astrology.
Sure. But it's interesting because you will see some stuff like this, maybe not full blown in people.
Yeah, partially. Yeah.
Like a friend of mine, for example, has let's see, I think he has his moon in Taurus, but toward the end of Taurus, like the 29th degree, in like the sixth house of a Sag ascendant, and it's combust. It's like literally like 1 degree from the sun or so.
And that's the eighth lord.
Sorry, excuse me.
What happened?
I'm getting a phone call, and it's not taking. I tried to silence it, but it wasn't taking a hit anyway. This person has like we're talking about situation like we're talking about now. He does have aspects, I think, from benefics, I think from at least Jupiter, and I forget where Venus is, but the moon is in not so great condition. It's also very near Algol, the fixed star Algol. And this person would have died at like 16 if he hadn't been able to undergo a very modern and very experimental back surgery.
Oh, wow. He had scoliosis or something?
Oh, no, he had something much worse. I don't remember the name of it, but it was really a horrible affliction. And like literally before modern methods of surgery, he would have died. And so this stuff is real, you know, like
the moon is exalted. So, I mean, mulatricona. So you have something there.
Moon's, in a very good place, but it is, it is combust, it is with Algol, and it is in the sixth house, things that do somewhat damage its good condition, right?
So if it would have been another dignity, he probably would have had more tribulations, more problems, I guess.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think, again, I'm pretty sure exalted Jupiter is making an aspect, though it may be a wide one. It's like a wide sextile, but still, at the very least, having that is helpful. And I think Jupiter is in his 8th house, so even though it's not a great house, Jupiter is, I think, helping his longevity and stuff. But the point is that with modern medicine, especially surgery, we can keep people alive that normally would have died. And so, it's a very interesting question for astrologers about like what that means, and to contemplate what that means in terms of like karma and fate and so on. And I think that we have to sort of like, we have to take those things into account when we're looking at this stuff. It's like, instead of the person will die, it becomes like the person like will have a serious life-threatening condition.
Which also goes along with the things we've said before, that sometimes these texts exaggerate. And in the modern context, these exaggerations can be interpreted as the way this knowledge was transmitted in ways to protect it, right?
Yeah,
that
definitely.
Exaggeration is used, hyperbole is used to hid the real meanings of it. Because when you see these bad combinations, it mainly means, surgery, sickness. Maybe you're fired from your, things like that are not as fatal as, terminal illness or accidents of a fatal nature.
Precisely. And I wanted to share another story too, though, where, I mean, these are exaggerations, and then at the same time, they're not. It's a weird paradox. I mean,
Exactly.
it's a
Yeah,
weird
exactly.
paradox where, like thinking about some of the characteristics of Aquarius given by like valence, just because that's what comes to mind. And thinking about how, like, I know somebody,
Can you
Aquarius.
talk about them for people who don't know them? The
Oh,
qualities of Aquarius
oh,
that
from
could define.
Valens, yeah, they're just very negative. Like they're just very like it's like a man who hates his own family and like who's like jealous and envious and like
Yeah, we have
a
a lot of
drunkard
planets.
and
We have a
stuff.
lot of planets in there. So
Yeah,
yeah,
we both do. We both
yeah.
do. But I was thinking, well, I know someone with Aquarius rising who has a lot of these qualities, but they're still fundamentally a good person. So it's this like paradox where these difficult things aren't always speaking. They're not speaking one dimensionally, and that's what's
Definitely.
that's what's hard to wrap our heads around. And I think it can be dangerous to like look at somebody's you don't want to judge the ultimate nature of their soul from their horoscope. You basically, I think the best we can do is to assess correctly
Well,
like
the
their
question
actions and motivations, but not
yeah,
necessarily the ultimate state of their soul.
yeah. The question is that even possible? That's not
No,
possible.
I really think it's only possible for the
If
divine,
you are
and
if you are a yogi, maybe, or somebody who
yeah,
has
very high yogi.
yeah, yeah. And he's not even gonna need your birth details.
No,
Yeah.
but my point is that like you can see somebody that has like a heavy Mars influence or Saturn influence, and they may have some of these really cruel qualities, but then you'll find that when it comes down to it, they're actually a really good person that has a lot of good, just good to offer and good intentions, but they're a harsh individual. But anyway, sorry, I got away from myself. The other one I wanted to mention is I was looking at testing these techniques of determining if a person will have children or not a long time ago from Persian methods. And I found this chart of somebody I knew who had two kids, and I was just like, oh my God, this is like brutal for children. Like, why do they even have children? And so I asked them, like, hey, just for like my own research, did you have any problems birthing your children?
You mean
And
like conceiving? Yeah.
yeah, and oh no, I mean like giving birth. Like I mean this
Oh,
is
okay,
this
okay.
is
Give
a person
birth.
that would have probably died in childbirth if it weren't for modern medicine. Both times they gave birth, so it was really spot on. But again, because of modern medicine and stuff, we have to realize that these things are not going to be quite as fatal
Yep.
anymore. Which is,
Positive.
I think so. Yeah, I think generally it's a very good thing. I'm very happy to have had these friends in my life.
Although from an environmental point of view, from a demographic point of view, from a
Right.
animal
It's a double-edged
malnutrition point
sword.
of view, is not necessarily that good, right?
It's a double-edged sword. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Okay, so yeah, just a lot. Oh, what I wanted to mention is I was really impressed with this. This made me think a lot. This stuff about Jupiter just being like destroyed, right? It just destroys the life immediately, right?
if it's in the jack, I mean, if it's in a bad place, in bad dignity,
Yeah, and
not because
well,
it
Mars
destroys it.
specifically.
Yeah, not because it destroys it, because it loses strength to protect.
Yeah, so they're really giving a lot to Jupiter here, and again, like thinking about my friend who I mentioned, he has a very powerful Jupiter, albeit in the eighth house, and it did indeed, arguably, it could be arguably
Protected
one of the
him.
things. Yeah, and I have another friend with Sag rising who has Jupiter in the eighth who had a similar, not the same medical affliction, but another medical malady as a young individual, and arguably that Jupiter made a huge difference.
And
I
if he
would,
was born during the day, oh no, he was born during the night. No,
no, both of these were
your,
night births
your friend
actually.
was born during the night. Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's still Jupiter. Okay,
that's why
seven.
he's guru.
Yeah, yeah. Good point. Seven was interesting to me as well. If the ascendant is occupied by either sun or moon and is aspected by a malefic, and if the malefics are strong and in the trines, and if the lord of the ascendant or moon is in the 12th place, it causes a loss of life immediately. This idea of the trines is very illustrative of something that I sort of came to on my own about the trines is that the trines are really what most directly support the person. You know, they're like a passive but very powerful support, whereas the
You mean the trines in relation to the ascendant? So you're meaning
yeah,
the
and
fifth and the ninth.
to any point
Oh, okay. To
for
any
any
point.
topic you're considering,
Oh,
but
okay.
for this topic we're considering the life and the person. So
Okay.
the
Because
trines
they
being
say that malefic aspects in trine are not negative.
right, exactly. It's the idea that the whatever is in the trines becomes more positive because it's that geometrical relationship of the Illuminati. Um, so any planets in the trines are in the Illuminati, and so basically you're getting this support because the triangle, the equilateral triangle, is the most harmonically stable shape of like the basic shapes. I guess next to like maybe the honeycomb shape too. I don't know which one's stronger, but
Well, it's the same because the honeycomb is an hexagram, which would be a sextile, which would be a lower octave.
yeah,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
right. So it's still triangular, but anyway, so I just thought that was really cool to see that because you have the angles as being the most active and like sometimes in your face influences in the life, but the trines are just like this sort of unwavering support. And I think that's one of the reasons they're called the Lakshmi Sthana, because Lakshmi is that aspect of Divine Mother that is like most caring and most relatable to all individuals, whereas something like some aspect like Kali is more of a specific function, that purification by destruction of anything that is not of the most high. And so, the trines here become very important, just like they are in later Jyotish. So at least from a historical perspective, too, it's very interesting to look at. And I think that's pretty much all I have to say. Did you want to say anything else about it?
No, man. I think these combinations, as I said before, make sense. Always when we see the Lagna Lord in relation to the sixth, eighth, or 12, or malefics hemming the ascendant, hemming the significators of self, you're gonna see arishtas, and that's basically how you can see these combinations. And they are usually, if you know the basics, they kind of all make sense, unless
Yeah.
you say something really Peter Panish, like combining things that are not supposed to be there. But usually all classics are very straightforward. Malefic influences, hemming, concentration of lots of significators of self in one place on their attack, the debilitation of Jupiter, obviously. Because Jupiter does not destroy, Jupiter becomes unable to protect, and that's why the Arishta is formed in many ways.
Yeah. And I was just thinking too that I'm going to stop the share here, but I was just thinking too that these are really brutal topics and yogas and whatnot.
Yeah, but I mean, that's part of the trade. You know what I mean? Suffering is part of life. That's why sadness.
Yeah. Well, what
The
I was
thing
going to
is
say.
that for people who are not aware, they can't jump the gun. You gotta
Yes.
see
Yeah.
the confluence of factors. I mean,
You don't want to get scared by this. No, you don't want to get scared by it. But no, but I was going to say is like where this becomes useful in actual
medical astrology.
No. Well, yes, in medical, but in client work is that, let's say somebody came to you and their child died, or their baby was stillborn or something like that, or their baby was born and then died. They might be looking for closure, and you have to be very intuitive to know if this is the right thing to do, right? So I'm not just recommending it outright, but I'm saying that some people might be comforted to know that their child's horoscope was not really guaranteeing a long life, because for some people that might, like a stoic type person or a person who's very deeply religious, that might help them to see that on some level this was just as things were supposed to be, and it's not so horrible. So, but you have to be very aware. It's not many people that are going to be able to hear that. Okay?
Definitely, but there's another case which has to do with exactly what you just said, which is something I discussed with one of my teachers a while ago. There's another case where parents want to have a child, right? But
oh yes,
the significators that you're talking about
Or
are
afflicted.
preventing that child to be born, precisely because if he were to be born, he would suffer the things that you're saying.
Right. So
So
that's
that
another reason.
creates another dilemma in terms of maybe the before to the after you're mentioning the fact that what are you supposed to do? You're going to say, well, the karmas here are difficult for childbirth. So if they want to have a childbirth, what is the astrologer supposed to say? Give them advice on how to conceive, or give them advice and telling them, look, if you conceive, you're probably going to have problems with this potential child, right? Which is the things that you are mentioning. So that's like the preconception, the inception before the action is what's the word, uh, conceived, right? The before the action is done and comes to fruition. So it's the moral, the morals there are very present in terms of what one is supposed to do. So yeah, I mean, but you have to find confluence, and that's rarely the case.
Yeah.
You rarely see like a very, very, very specific bad karma, and
Oh,
usually,
I've seen them. I mean, there was one person who she adopted a couple boys.
and they all went sour.
Well, no, but it was like she couldn't conceive, and then later it turned out it was more likely her ex-husband who just couldn't get her
Was
pregnant.
infertile.
Yeah, and then she adopted these kids, and she's not really
Happy with them.
I don't think so. I mean, she's not really a motherly type of person, and it's like, what are people trying to do? They're trying to be happy, and I think she has like Saturn Ketu or Saturn Rahu in her 5th house, and so it's like, this is the person you tell, like, if they're asking you, like, am I going to be happy having children? Probably not.
No.
Probably not.
No.
For a variety of reasons that hopefully you can extrapolate upon.
And then she would ask you. She would ask you, and I get this a lot. Can I change that?
Right. And I was going to say too, I am not a big fan of prescribing remedies to alter these kinds of aspects of life, because it's not,
the thing is,
you might get what you want, but then you might go, oh, I got what I wanted. And it wasn't.
Be careful what you wish for. But the thing is, remedies even work in these situations. I mean, that's a total other topic. We've never really discussed I've never really discussed with you your opinion about remedies. I have my opinion about remedies, but
yeah, we should make a video on that sometime, because it's
I don't believe in. I mean, I believe in appeasing, right, in softening the blow, but like removing things with remedies, I don't think that's.
Well, I believe that true yoga is the ultimate remedy. Like true yogic.
Yeah,
practices are real remedies. Like, you don't ask, for example, like you don't ask for money. You ask for like abundance and like a spiritual, mental, emotional, physical wealth, or you ask for the ability to always get what you need to live well and to serve the greater whole, or however you want to put it. But if you just say, I just want $1 million, well, people like. A lot of people that win lotteries and get that kind of money, they don't know what to do with it. And they get like weird death threats. People try to steal from them, or they have a break.
Family members come from the woodworks that you never even knew existed.
Yeah. And what if you get all that money, right? And like, secretly you have this desire to, this very unhealthy desire, and it manifests as like, I don't know, just like going on like a coke fueled binge and like sleeping with a lot of people and like
prostitutes,
ending up with like some venereal disease, and then you're broke and you're homeless. Like, these things happen because people are not ready for that kind of thing. So it's better to ask in a way that is harmonious and will put you in alignment with spirit or truth or God, whatever you want to call it, than it is to just compartmentalize these areas of life and say, oh, I just need $10,000 or $1 million, and like, just give me that, please.
I think that remedies, what they are supposed to aim for is acceptance, right? Acceptance of the situation and how to deal with that. Like Aikido. I don't know if you've trained Aikido. Like,
I've done Tai Chi, which is maybe a little similar.
Okay, cool. The idea with Aikido is that you take the movement of the opponent and you use it to your favor, and that's what remedies should do. I mean, remedies should not go forward with the idea that a remedy is to eliminate something. It's more the idea of how to accept something and use it in your favor. Right.
Yeah,
that's how I see it. Because eventually, you know, that's karma that has to be paid, and you have to pay it in a way. But yeah, we're talking about other topics where I guess.
Yeah. Well, maybe a full video another time, but otherwise, thanks for joining us for chapters 35 through 38 of the Yavanajataka, and we hope to see you back at the next video we make until we get through the entire text, God willing. And like, subscribe, check out Fernando's channel and website as well. It'll all be in the description below, as it always is with these videos. And otherwise, have a great, blessed day. Thanks, Fernando.
Remember our
oh yeah.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. You have to